meeting will come to order. Let's take a roll call for attendance. Is Henry Thayer acting as meeting moderator? Next.
Jason Ralph. Sorry. Roland Benjamin.
Dave, how's that? Dave?
Dave, you're on mute. There you go.
Dave Finaro.
Okay.
Unmuted.
Jason?
Jason Ralph.
Lauren?
Where am I stuck? Here.
And Kristen?
Kristen Johnson.
And just for the audio record, Rob Zarnetsky, town manager, Jean Bouchard, the town assessor, and Lorianne Fox are joining the committee. Town IT director, Lorianne.
Welcome.
Okay. As far as the minutes are concerned of the 10/22 meetings, there's a couple of things in there that bear correcting. Does anyone have any input on that?
Anyone look at it?
Yeah, well, I do. I have a general comment, which is that I think the minutes would be more useful if they were written with less detail about our discussions and more clearly stated any decisions that we made. And then I got on this because early on it said Susan had something to do with the recording, and I think all I did was reminded somebody that the recording was supposed to start. I don't think that needs to be in the minutes.
No.
In general, in my experience with useful minutes, they are better when they reduce the discussion to a few points and highlight whatever decisions we made. So that's just a general comment. I don't have anything more specific.
Well, my observation is that on the first page, it says discussion of health equity zones and the town council's goal. There are a number of, the points are all numbered. And the first two, A and B there, does not have any kind of number on it. I mean, if it's the sentence above it, then that should have a number on it, number one. Also, I tend to agree with Susan on this, that it seems to be full of spurious, for lack of a word, detail that isn't typically what you'd find in minutes. Usually you find what the committee has decided on. So Rob, who wrote these minutes anyway? Did you write them?
No, I didn't. It's a junior staff member who was having her first whack at minutes. And
okay.
An opportunity to review this critique, and hopefully this is helpful, and she'll get better at it as she goes. It was her first set. She's participated in board meetings before, but this is her first set of meeting minutes.
All right. Do you want to have her take another swipe at this?
Yep.
And try to condense it from 3 pages down to like 1?
Okay.
Could I just add, I mean, I don't, my sense, meeting minutes for me, it are most useful when they are mapping on to the agenda from the meeting that they're based upon.
Yeah.
So just even structuring the minute, this is feedback to her, that if she could structure the minutes to map onto the agenda with this feedback, that it perhaps does not need to be at this level of detail and focused more on actions and motions. Yeah. I think
I did review your meeting minutes and sent them on as they were. My observation is that I think the skill she's mentioned is sort of gleaning important elements of the conversation. Getting your long meeting down to even 3 pages is actually quite an accomplishment. I think you're right that there's more distilling that can be done here. And I do think that it would be useful to give her a template. The agenda is that template. Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, do we want to approve these minutes?
You can table them. They're with the Secretary of State as draft minutes, so there's no requirement that they be approved now.
Okay, so can I get a motion to table?
I'll offer a motion to table.
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah. Okay, so that's adopted. Okay, going to item 4 on the agenda, correspondence and public comment. Do we have anything?
No correspondence, and if any member of the public would like to comment, if you raise your hand, we will let you in to make comment. Okay, we have a member of the public, phone number ending in 6967. You are now, there you go.
Hi guys, it's Jocelyn. I'm sorry. I've been fighting with my computer for the last half hour to get in. I just wanted you to know I'm here and I'm on my phone.
Okay.
That's all.
All right.
So,
You're like, wow, we have a
sorry.
viewer.
I've been, you what?
No, I just said we're like, wow, we have a viewer.
Yeah.
No.
that was exciting.
In
Well,
fact,
what you had right now was a very frustrated committee member. So, but I'm here now. So I just want you to know it was me. All right.
Okay,
do-
so Jocelyn, thank you.
and John
Yeah.
just joined us too.
Yeah. The dog joined too? Okay.
Jonathan did.
The dog is here. The dog, yes, you should add that in as an attendee. The dog is here.
Okay.
You
So-
do have one other member of the public in the audience, Eric Harley. If you'd like to address the committee, now is the time to do so. If you raise your hand, I'll let you in. All right, you have no comments from the public.
Okay, so let the minutes show in roll call that Jocelyn and Jonathan Daly LaBelle have also joined the meeting. Okay, so going to item 5, discussion. Been long awaiting for Lori Fox to come in and my old friend John Paul Bouchard. So Rob, perhaps you could introduce them, let them into the meeting, and Lori can open things up because I looked through a number of things that she got very interesting. I'd like to hear more.
Lori Fox is our Director of Information Technology and has a pretty good sense of the database environment. You've received a summary of the databases that she's aware of. There are some, I'm sure, scattered across the government that nobody knows about, but she knows where most of them are. Lori?
Good evening. How are you?
Well, there you are.
All right. So if folks have reviewed what I provided, in my 7 years that I've worked for the town, I've kept a list of various applications and databases that we have throughout the town. And in there, I've listed who the departmental data custodian is. I don't know if there's something in particular that you have a question on, or if there's a particular database that you might be more interested in more than the other. I can certainly go through what I have there if that's helpful.
Yes. Yeah, if you
Okay.
give us a walkthrough, okay?
Sure. So the first couple that are listed have to do with actually Jean, who's also in the meeting this evening. The appraisal information would be current and historical information going back to 2012 in regards to property values and including both residential and commercial. The next database, also going back through 2012, is our real estate, tangible inventory, and autos that we have throughout the town. That would be the items that generate tax bills for. The next database is within the building department. That's planning and zoning information. That goes back electronically to 2013. However, they have paper copies going back to like the beginning of time, basically. That's a statewide system that the town has been working on that folks can apply online. So there's various plans and attachments. The prior building official, along with the current interim building official, have started to track zoning as well as minimum housing complaints in that database as well. The next couple of databases have to do with the communications department in relation to the fire alarm testing data. So we have a municipal fire alarm system that by fire code businesses have to attach to. That's something that Lance Whaley works with. And we've recently upgraded that. Even though all the businesses have not converted over, we gave them, I believe, a 5-year window to convert over so that they could prepare monetarily to make that jump. The next few databases have to do with the Department of Public Services. So we have water and sewer usage and billing. That goes back to 2013. We have our meter reading system, and that's recently been converted over to a cloud-based system in 2019, but the data goes back to 2015. We have several access databases in that department that have to do with citizen issues and service requests, as well as right-of-way permits, and a street paver management system that they use to assess roads to decide when a road needs to either be completely repaved or just an overlay and so forth. We also keep track of contractors who can work in the town's right-of-way. Recently, the right-of-way permit for both the contractors and general right-of-way permits, we're actually migrating over to the same database that the building office uses for permits, so that can be available online for people to use. We just did that during the COVID pandemic to lessen the foot traffic into the Public Services Department. The next 4 have to do with engineering. They could probably give you a bit more detail than I do because the data is not necessarily kept historically. They use a couple of different CAD systems in order to do some site analysis and drainage analysis for various projects going on in town. And then I'm not sure how they keep the data. I think they may keep more exported copies into, the form of a map or a PDF. Occasionally, depending on the size of the project, it will get integrated into the town's GIS system. They also have a surveying system as well as a piece of software that allows them to do traffic analysis that they can put out on the roads to assess the number of vehicles traveling down that particular road to see if they need to do future signage or they need to adjust the flow of traffic for a particular street. The next one has to do with the town's financial system. So that includes all aspects of finance, requisition, purchase orders, fixed assets that belong to the town, to include property and buildings in there, the budget information, cash management, payroll, and HR. This also encompasses the school department data. We use one comprehensive system between town and school and share that. And the detail data goes back to 2014, and we have summary data that we converted from 2011 to 2013. The GIS system is something that's maintained within the planning department, the GIS division. I believe you may have spoken to Carol Baker before. She has various layers that she includes, and GIS is linked to several of our systems. It's linked to the building and zoning system. It's also used heavily by the assessment office for various reasons. But there's street layers, there's water and sewer mains, there's plat boundaries, flood areas. We also keep track of our various zoning data there as well. Highway has a few access databases and SQL databases that keep track of fuel management for all of the vehicles that the town utilizes. That system also allows them to get mileage and error codes off of the vehicles in the event that they need to do service maintenance to them. The plow and street routes, that actually is linked with GIS as well, so that we can provide the highway staff on the best ways for plowing and sanding and making sure that they get all of the streets within the town. The work order system is just that. It's a listing of work orders in the event that folks call about a tree down, or it could be a pothole and so forth. That actually, along with fuel management and a number of other databases within the public services department and subdivisions, is going to be migrated to a cloud-based system, hopefully in early 21. And that would allow us to use tablets in the field and to be a little more proactive and be able to share the information. It'll also encompass the Parks and Rec department and our facilities maintenance, which right now a lot of their work orders and issues that they're trying to handle on a day-to-day basis are handled on paper right now. So the hope is to get that all into the comprehensive asset management system. We do have a emergency notification system that is cloud-based. That's actually a statewide application that residents and businesses can join to get emergency notification, whether that be weather-related or street-related. Public safety has their computer-aided dispatch and their records management that maintains all the calls going into the police department, whether that be for police, for our fire districts, as well as EMS calls. We have a mugshot system within the police department that they use to facilitate witness statements. We also have surveillance and recorded lines. So we have things that come into dispatch. We record all of that and we keep that for about a year. We have an accident reconstruction system that we're actually looking at hopefully upgrading it. It's a few years old, and right now requires usually 2 to 3 officers who have been trained in that area to reconstruct an accident. And right now they tend to do that after the accident has been cleared as opposed to in real time. So we'd like to potentially upgrade that so we could be doing it in real time. The Senior Center has a list of all the folks who participate in their classes and registrations. They also have a couple of statewide databases that have to do with clients receiving their services as well as Medicare assistance. I tend to think a lot of the information in there might be more of a classified nature, so that other than getting general numbers out of there, it might be difficult to kind of jump into that. The clerk's office has, as you can see, several databases. They use the same system as building and zoning to do online business and alcohol licenses. We've been doing that since 2014, and it's gone quite well. We've been able to improve what used to take several weeks to get a license to a matter of a few days. They also have a land evidence system, the statewide voting system that they use that's cloud-based. There's also a statewide birth record information that the state houses. We also have some smaller databases that contain all of our dog licenses, probate court information, marriage and death licenses, and our boat mooring registrations. The clerk's office also maintains all agendas, minutes, and videos. That's in the clerk-based system. And we have a town-wide building security system where we keep track of folks who have entered or closed up the building at the end of the day, so we can keep track of who's in and out of the building in case there were an incident. Wastewater has several databases as well. Many of these we're looking to pull into that comprehensive asset management system. So they maintain, by state law, they have to maintain several databases with hazardous materials, what they're putting into, whether it be the water system or the wastewater system, they have to report that. And they report that through that EMA software. They also have a work order system. They have a pre-treatment system that they use to report back to Rhode Island DEM. They have a septic management system that we've actually migrated to the cloud a few years ago. And they have a methane sensor database that they've maintained since the year 2000, keeping track of various complaints and issues that they have gotten in relation to the wastewater system.
Okay, Lori, this is pretty impressive. Good job.
Thank you.
A couple of questions. One is, oh, maybe this is more of a Jean-Paul Bouchard question, but on the town's asset, do we put asset tags on all the town property?
So for town property, we don't put physical asset tags any longer. Many years ago, we did that, but we keep a fixed asset inventory within the Munis system that the finance department maintains. And depending on what it is, so let's say I'll just take Town Hall, for instance. Mm-hmm. They would have Town Hall from when it was built and then any add-ons. So the second wing of the building down like where my office is and finance and so forth, that new section would have been an add-on to the asset. So if the asset was worth, $3 million and that piece of the property improved it by $500,000, they would have notated when that was approved to increase the value.
Yeah. Okay, just a few more questions. Bear with me, please.
Yep.
Would you say you're obviously using Microsoft Access a lot? You're using SQL databases. Are those housed on servers in the town hall?
So
So hold on a second.
some are housed.
Hold on, Lori. Before we go on,
Yep.
I want to be careful about publicly describing the infrastructure
Yeah.
of our systems. I don't want to get into what's cloud-based and what's on servers. It's not relevant to the work of the SMART committee. It's not important for us to have publicly.
Where I was alluding to was understanding how those servers are protected, and if we in any of our endeavors.
Yeah, and we're not getting into discussion.
Hold on one second. And if we, during our endeavors, would need access to the data on those servers, how would we do it?
Yeah,
The request access.
we're not in a position right now to talk about committee access to databases. We're describing the databases. If the committee identifies a need for data, we'll figure out how to deal with that.
Okay. So it would be in terms of
So
like
if
putting a request in and then having a request processed. Okay?
so most, if not all, of the databases, regardless of whether they're in-house or cloud-based, we can export data. If it's in Access or a SQL database, it's fairly simple to pull the data out. Some of the older databases might be a bit more difficult, and that would be more in the area of the wastewater office has some old databases for their chemicals and things like that. That software doesn't really change very often, but as I said, we're looking at converting that to a newer system in the hopes that that information would be easier to extract when requested.
Okay. Okay, that's where I was going, Rob. Rob, you're on mute.
No, that's good. That's great.
That's where I was going.
The point that's important for the committee is if there's a need for data, we'll figure out how to get you the data so long as it's disclosable. Obviously, privacy laws apply to everything. There are certain databases that are security sensitive. For example, the mugshots, maybe not. Security camera data may be not available to the committee. We've got to look at requests as they come in. But talking about the infrastructure and where we have things, it's just not helpful at this point.
Okay. Are there any more questions for Lori?
Who do we make requests to for data? You go through you, Rob, or?
So I think the committee, if we're talking about committee work, then I think the committee has to make the request, and they can make it, through me is fine. I mean, by a request that says, we are interested in understanding vehicle fleet characteristics in South Kingstown. Therefore, we'd like to get the assessor's data on motor vehicles for the last 8 years. That's a perfectly valid request. We can work with that. Those data actually are, Gene, you want to talk about accessing the assessor's data, because much of those data are available publicly already.
In reference to the kind of data that we have?
Yep. What do you have that is publicly available, actually? Let's talk about that.
Okay, as far as real estate goes, we do revaluations every 3 years, and we have data going back 3 revaluations, 2012, 15, and 18. We're working on a new revaluation this coming year, starting in February. But the property record cards, we have the property owner's name and mailing address, the deed book reference of the book and page of ownership. We have building permit information, the date the permit was taken out and what the permit was for. We have the land size, land assessments. We have dwelling information, the living square footage of the dwelling, the style of the dwelling, whether it's a cape or a ranch or a contemporary, the quality of construction. We have an estimated effective age of the dwelling, which reflects condition. Things like the components that make up the dwelling, the exterior siding, the type of roof covering, interior floor coloring, the heating type, central air conditioning or not, number of rooms, finished lower levels, exterior features like porches and decks and how those are assessed, swimming pools, garages. Those are all on the field card. That's, in a nutshell, that's what we have on our field card information. That all culminates in a land assessment and a dwelling assessment, and with a total assessment for the property. We have tangible personal property. That's equipment used in conjunction with businesses. We have the owner's name and the total assessed valuation. A form is sent out every year to ask people to complete the form as to what type of equipment they have associated with their business, when it was purchased, the purchase price of the date it was acquired, and then it's depreciated based on the date of acquisition. We have motor vehicle information. We have about 31,000 motor vehicles in town. We get that information from the Division of Motor Vehicles. It's downloaded every January. That has the vehicle owner's name, the license plate that's associated with the vehicle. We do not give out that information, who owns the vehicle or who's associated with which license plate. But we do have the year and make of the vehicle, the number of days the vehicle was owned, and the clean retail value that the state of Rhode Island puts on it. Motor vehicles are taxed in arrears. So you're taxed in 2020 for license plate registration activity that took place in 2019, the previous year. But basically that's what we do as far as real estate, tangible personal property, and motor vehicles.
So much of that is available publicly. We wanted to run a special. So for example, if we wanted to do a study on the correlation between affordable housing and housing condition, the condition of the houses may in fact be relevant here. We might have, but to do that kind of thing, we'd have to do a special export. We'd have to pull the data out through Lori's office.
Yeah. But the data that's out there, I've been out into that property database that Gene maintains is very good data. In fact, I just made a trip out there last week. Okay, do we have any more questions?
There's a lot there.
It is true, there certainly is, but it's impressive to see how much is there.
Yeah.
That's the point, it's impressive.
And the shame of it is it sits there. It gets used for the one purpose that it's collected, and it never gets rethought about.
Is it, I don't want to get into like what's available, but what's legitimate to ask for, but something like, can we ask for like a schema of a database to know what it's actually in the database?
Yes.
Like tables and fields and stuff, so we could tell them we want, I could write a query, to say this is exactly what I want.
The answer is yes. You can certainly ask for them. And what we're going to have to do is evaluate whether or not it's privacy protected, security related. We'd have to do an evaluation of the request to determine whether or not we can release the data. Much of this stuff is just, I don't know, let's take operational data. We've got, I don't know, the wastewater chemical history, chemical additive history. We're not likely to have any security issues around that. It's possible, but it's not likely. So most of what Lori's described, some of it makes me nervous. So, but most of what Lori's described is probably going to be something that we can look at the data structure on and form, reasonable questions about. Lori, any thoughts on security on anything that you've described? Because the stuff that you're nervous about, I know you didn't even describe.
So the only thing I will say is, the SQL databases, we could definitely get schema information on. The police departments, like pervasive SQL, some of those that are proprietary to a vendor, we would have to ask the vendor for a file layout. And I don't know whether they'd consider that to a certain degree, like their intellectual property. That I don't know. Some vendors don't like giving out some of that information. Some have what they call a data dictionary, which I think is what like Jason was alluding to if you wanted to do a query. But the only data that I would be concerned about would be obviously any potentially payroll HR information is private.
Yeah, there's all the work product data in the finance databases. There's some stuff that makes me a little nervous, and we'd have to be careful about.
I think, as you mentioned, the mugshot, I think recorded calls. I think after a case is closed, I think does fall under public purview. However, if it has something to do with an ongoing case, I don't think it can be released. So there may be in the police department area, in the Medicare information with the senior center, birth, deaths, marriages, those are protected as well. So some of it we may just want to check with Mike Orsillo, just to confirm before anything was given out. But I do know marriage, births, and death certificates are all, I think they go for like 100 years or something.
Yeah, it's quite
Susan, it's even after the person is deceased. There's a law on that, and Susan would know definitely, but that is protected.
Rob, can you hear me?
Sure. Yep.
Oh, great. Who knew? Magic of the internet. So I read an interesting article today on strong towns. Actually, I've been rereading this article more than once over the last week to try to grasp the depth of it. And I'm wondering if it would be possible, and Lori and Jean, this would pull both of you in. Hi, Jean, how are you? It would pull both of you in the sense that I would love to know if it's possible to create a heat map of our neighborhoods by affluence and then overlay it with municipal maintenance. Because the article was surrounding the concept, and it was Strong Towns USA that I follow and read on, was talking about the fact that a community is only as prosperous as its least affluent community within the community.
Yeah.
The microsystem within the meso and macro system. So I was interested, is that possible to do a heat map and then overlay it with municipal maintenance and investment? Is something like that possible?
Yeah, so we have affluence data, which is obviously tied to location right now. It's easy.
Can you do it by heat map?
We have an address. We can do a heat map of affluence. In fact, we've done a heat map of affluence. That's a map that I asked for a couple of years ago, and we've got
I feel
it.
like you and I talked about that at one time, yeah.
We've got that map. The issue with an overlay dealing with maintenance is the maintenance records are probably by intersection on roads, the geocoding is not very good. It's not going to be a lat long, so it's not going to be easy to put onto a database. What you'd have to do is you'd have to take the address where or the street location, the intersection, and you'd have to tie that to a lat long before you could put it on the map. It would be it would be a data entry problem.
So the conclusion or the overall theme of this particular article that I was reading and rereading was, where do you begin? And you begin at the first step, which is maintenance of your least affluent neighborhoods in order to raise the level of your entire community. I thought it was a very, it made an impression on me. It made an impression on Tom as I shared it with him. And I thought, that would be a question I'd like to know. Additionally, one more overlay, one more. We could do 3 in different colors.
I've got a surrogate that will speak exactly to that issue. We just produced a map of where the private roads are maintained by the town under tradition. We have 9 miles of private road.
Yeah, I have a house on one of them.
And that map is all in the south. Those private roads are not up in Uskapog. They are down in Green Hill. They are down south one. So it is, it's a surrogate. So if we use that as the evidence, we're not hitting the objective in that article.
Could we overlay it with profitable, because profitable neighborhoods were interesting as well. It was pretty interesting relationship between the least amount of municipal investment and the highest profitable regions within small communities. It was a pretty interesting article, which I'm happy to share if anybody wants it. You can just email me, but or you can go to Strong Towns USA and look at it yourself. So is it possible, Lori and Jean Paul, to create that kind of document, or is that just ridiculous what I'm asking?
Well, I think the issue we have is some of the data is not geocoded. So right now, when they're doing a work order, which is in an access database for whether it be street maintenance, or they're going out and doing pruning of trees and removal of a tree or something like that in the town, or improving the road and doing construction, they're not tying that to a geocode right now. The new asset management system is gonna tie everything back to a geocode, which will let it very nicely integrate with GIS, and then you get that layering effect that you're talking about. I don't know if we could get that information out of public services and somehow link it. My concern would be the accuracy of it.
So at some point, I'm just tossing this on the table, no commitment from anybody. That would be something I'd be very interested in looking at. So just looking at equitable distribution of assets and municipal funding of our least profitable and our least affluent communities within our community, and our most affluent least profitable, because most affluent is least profitable, least affluent is most profitable in most general circumstances. I'd be interested in looking at that and seeing how we begin to equitably distribute assets and bring our various small communities together into one. So I'm just throwing that on the table. That's an area that I have interest in, and now I'm going back on mute.
Lori, is there interested in the birth database? Are there addresses? Could you do a heat map of where births were across town to help with redistricting, stuff like that?
Interesting.
So that does have street information,
Okay.
the births. So we could extract probably the streets and be able to put that on an overlay for GIS to see where they are.
Lori, the challenge there is going to be what street address we've got on the record. You've got mother's street of residence.
There's going to be error and uncertainty in any data set.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we'll get a general sense of what the trends are over time.
What I'm afraid you're going to find though is it's all hospital. What you're going to find is the hospital street address.
Yeah.
That's what I think you're going to end up with.
Mm,
But anyway.
It's worth looking at.
yeah, I can check that and get back to you in the morning, Rob.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I haven't seen a birth record in a while. But, you know. As I remember, the typical birth record is mother's place of birth, father's place of birth, residence at time of birth. I don't think there's a street address there, and then the place of birth, which has a street address, as I remember it. But it's been a while. All right.
Thank you both. This is really helpful.
Very helpful.
Jean, Lori, thank you. You can stick around if you'd like. Nope. Thanks, guys. Jean, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night, Lori. Good night, Jean.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can pursue item B, coordination with other committees on the agenda.
Yep. So the email was set to go out. I don't know that it actually did. Last time I checked with Colleen to see whether that email had gone out to the other committees was Monday. And as of Monday, it had not yet gone out. She wanted to do two separate emails, one to department heads and one to committees. I will say that I've talked to a number of department heads, and you've got your first project to consider from the town engineer. He'll be here at the next meeting to ask you in person, but what he's contemplating is getting some assistance in organizing a community-wide data gathering exercise. He is a engineer who is also a landscape architect by training, and he has a strong interest in developing a visual database of streets in South Kingstown so that we've got a reference point for planning and for town projects to make sure that we're sort of integrating things into those neighborhoods appropriately. So he wants to be able to call up for the planning board. This is the streetscape adjacent to this proposed site for development, or this site where there's proposed development. The exercise as he envisions it would be organizing a volunteer corps, or all of the people in South Kingstown at noon on a particular day, go out and take a photograph of, you know, what's to the north side of the road, the south side of the road, sort of organize a large number of people to do one large photo snapshot of the community. It's an interesting idea, and I told him he should come and ask you about it.
Okay.
That isn't something Google does already, or Google's is not the same point in time, or?
Well, Google is focused on the street, not on the things around the street. There is some Google-like stuff, but you've seen the Google stuff. It's distorted images. It's not aimed at getting an aesthetic portrayal of the neighborhood. He's interested in making sure that we have a database for planners and for the town engineer himself, and for folks who are contemplating building things or integrating things into the neighborhood to make them fit. So it's the aesthetics as opposed to the street facts, if you will. I don't know. Google doesn't do it well is I think the answer.
I think in response to the planning board meeting last week and the currently proposed project in Matunic, which is not the discussion for tonight, I understand, but I think that's an outstanding idea. I think it couldn't be better explained than looking at the most recent project before the planning board. So planning committee. So anything, particularly given my interest in beginning to look at how our community is laid out and maintenance and how we think about our various sections of our town, I could see that as being an incredibly useful tool. And certainly something that I'd be interested in participating in.
I think the help he's going to need is going to be in designing something that is manageable, a way to actually collect the data so that it's easy enough to do, and then captures the images that he needs. The volunteers are going to need some sort of training so that they're not making the same mistakes that Google makes, that kind of thing. They're not sort of aimed at the trees as opposed to, the facade of the building, for example. There's going to be some training involved. Anyway, that's
so just to clarify, it sounds like what we might be tasked with would be an outreach and data collection strategy coupled with protocols and then data organization structure. Is that?
That's what it sounds like to me. Yes. I think that's right. And of course, you're not going to be tasked with it. I think that the committee has sort of correctly identified itself as having some veto power over these requests. So he's going to make his pitch. It sounds like an interesting project. If it's one that the committee has an interest in pursuing, he'd welcome the help, I think. But it's not, you have to do this because the town engineer asked you to. Get more like that.
Okay, item C, employee engagement survey and questionnaire.
This one is another one, actually. This isn't coming from a department. This is from me. I've had some real concerns about morale, employee morale during COVID. And we haven't done a survey of employee engagement, as near as I can tell, ever. South Kingsdale has never done a survey of engagement or sort of morale among town employees. So the thought occurred to me that it'd be nice to start gauging this. It'd be nice to get a sense of how employees are feeling during COVID and generally. And I'm familiar with the federal, the OPM employee engagement survey. Their survey is an open survey instrument. It has the advantage, I think, of giving us some benchmarks. We could compare town responses to a large, very large data set that the federal government has probably developed over the last decade. We can look at small agencies. We can look at ourselves compared to the Department of Defense, which may or may not be a good thing to do, but we can certainly find some smaller agencies that would be, we'd expect to see similar employee characteristics on. Some units of the park department, for example, or National Park Service or something like that. Haven't thought much about who we do as comparables, but I think there's some virtue in having a long history to compare ourselves to rather than just doing an employee survey and having nothing to compare it to. The problem with the federal survey is that it's very long. I think there are 77 questions on that survey, not all relevant to South Kingstown at all. So one of the things that I'm looking for is for the folks on this committee to look at the questionnaire and strike what you don't think is relevant. Just tell us what we can pull out of the survey. If we got it down to 35 or 40 questions, I think I'd get people here to respond to it. At 74, 75, it's too many. And again, there's relevancy questions or relevancy.
Maybe chime in on this a little bit. This is something that I do in my own business once a year. And we actually, these cumbersome surveys, if you continue to use them and then use some of the data to create some improvement projects that address specific factors, you get more, you kind of reinforce the participation.
Mhm.
And then this is very similar to what I use. It's almost identical. The wording's different, but it's a similar kind of structure, broken out into several different groups. However, we just use Providence Business News does the best places to work in Rhode Island. The way it works is everybody that engages in that, you pay a small fee. I think we pay $700 for 70 employees. They administer the entire survey. They send out reminders to everybody in your database. They look to get as much feedback as possible. And it's literally, as the employer, all I have to do is sign a purchase order, write the check, and then remind employees that it's that time of year again. And we get an incredible report that comes out of this without any work on our part. And nice. I strongly recommend something like this to anybody, and it's available to any employer or anybody with employees. And it's like the easiest way to check off this box and get comprehensive information that you can use to steer some things up.
Nice. It looks like it might be a $3,000 bill for us, though.
Yeah, but nobody has to do any work because they're going to do it.
Well, that's nice. That's true. So yeah, Roland, if you could send me the contact for that, I will certainly follow up, because I'm all for
yeah, I'll do that.
Finding a good, simple, efficient path if that works. So let me do this then. Let me follow up on that, because it does sound very appealing. I'd like to see what they're asking, and if that works, then we might be able to just table this.
Rob, if I don't know, if I'm happy to send you the report that we have. It'll have my company information on it. I'd ask to keep that private, but I don't mind sharing it so you can see it and you can get a sense of what the output looks like. And then I'll send you I'll just send you the application link on what we do every year. It's probably timely, because I think we get started on that in around February. If I remember right, the survey starts getting filled out in April, and then we get a report by June. COVID changes.
So do you have the opportunity to tack on questions?
You have, there's something that I remember wanting having the ability to customize it a little bit. We looked at it and said, I don't really want to customize this, because in addition to being able to get this report, I also get a benchmark report for employers our size. And I didn't want to throw in a bunch of questions that give me nothing to compare to other employers. In the end, I really am looking at what is some measure of employee morale, for fear that I would lose these employees to another employer. And that's all I really care about. So,
right.
So no, so yeah, short answer. Yeah, I think you can customize. I found that it's not worth that effort. But I'll get both of those to you.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate it. That may save us time. And yeah, if it's $10 an employee, I mean, it's not a lot of money.
How many employees does the town have, Rob?
I'm looking probably at this going to probably about 230, 240.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Rob, you ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next item D, tax calculator tool.
All right. So I sent the tax calculator out again. I do want to start thinking about getting this out there. We're coming up on budget season. We've got the CIP coming out, not next week, but the beginning of the week after. Monday the 30th, I guess, is the date that comes out. And we're going to be into budget cycle again. It's going to be a relatively boring budget season, I think, but nonetheless, I think that may be the best time to roll something like this out. So I'm looking for input on the tool again. If folks have played with it, if you've looked at the notes on the spreadsheet, any comments or suggestions on how to make this more useful or more relevant, we're open to suggestions.
Yeah.
We have,
Go ahead, Jason.
At some last time we went through this, I remember that we were talking about this being kind of a more comprehensive version than would be shown to the public. That there would be a kind of a scaled down.
We were going to go, and we reached out to, and then everything went to heck went to COVID, I guess. We were going to reach out and see if we could get somebody to do a visual database version of this thing.
Yeah.
Never happened. It's worth doing that again. Henry, you had mentioned that there was somebody over at the high school, and I've lost track of who that was, who might be able to plug us into a programmer.
Yeah, he had, his name escapes me right now because I haven't been over there due to COVID, but he has students, especially seniors, that are required to spend a number of hours as a part of a project. Okay, I can look him up and get
send
back
me
to
that, and I'll send this on to them and see if they can put a visual basic front end on it.
Yeah, and I know they can, because those kids, when I took a couple of his classes, they were coding in Visual Basic.
Okay, good.
Okay, just bear in mind, they're going to do all their work off the high school servers, which are stuffed in the back of the library, but they're at least locked up,
Okay.
I just saw it for the first time today. If it was an earlier version was circulated, I must have missed it. But I took a quick look at it, and my immediate impression was this is a really extensive, maybe too extensive tool to circulate widely. It looks on the face of it pretty good. I didn't go through it cell by cell and really work with it, but just my first impression was this is probably going to be a little more than most people can chew.
So I will admit to having the following motivation in the design of that tool. I think that to Jocelyn's point, actually, I think that it's really easy for people when talking about municipal budgets to lose the details of the population in the discussion. We tend to think of the average taxpayer. We tend to think of the average value of a home. We tend to think of, people all having the same ability to pay, and they don't. And this tool was very much designed to deal with the fact that in South Kingstown, 1/3 of the households earn less than $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's a huge number of people who just don't sort of equate or don't sort of get much thinking in the budgetary process. And I think this tool was meant to get people to think about the detail and the relationship between individual taxpayers and the budget.
I thought I remember at one point in a prior meeting, probably going several months back, that one of the objectives, and maybe it could be a slightly simplified version of this, maybe there could be a couple of versions, but one of the objectives was to get people to understand how things like a school bond are going to affect them in the future. And that's a very targeted, specific thing to understand. The spreadsheet covers a lot more than that, but maybe for some specific purposes, there could be some reduced complexity versions.
Yeah, we could pull that component straight out of that spreadsheet. We could just take the debt service piece of it out and say this is what it costs you, and leave it at that. A nice visual database that says if we have $50 million worth of debt, this is what it costs, etc.
I like keeping in the calculation of discretionary income. and maybe pulling out a percentage of discretion. I mean, in the example that's there, it's negative, but that's the idea. I've always thought of taxes that way, as a percentage of what you have left to spend, rather than a percentage of what you started with.
Right.
Rob, I didn't run a literacy checker this time, but the last time I ran it, it was really high. It was like at the grad school level. I think I don't.
Yeah.
I need to rerun a literacy checker to see, but we need to, if that's going to be useful for across the population, we need to get that literacy level down to about the 6th grade level. So, you know, I'm happy to run it again. I'm gearing up for the South Road COVID testing site. So I haven't had time this week, but I will run it. I will run it again, but I just, to David's point, I think that we need to get it down to common language. And unfortunately, or fortunately, that common language is most usually thought of as a 6th grade level. So just putting that out there.
Questions on languages are always welcome. Thoughts on how to do that are great. All right.
Well, I would also like to say that I have never, ever completed one of these kinds of things. I don't keep a budget. I never did anything with my retirement. Was I going to be able to afford to live in retirement? I just found them mind numbing. I don't know this. So I would definitely argue. I mean, I realize I'm maybe not the target audience here, but I think it needs to be much simpler somehow. I think it just kind of needs to be the biggest to the 6th grade level. Like me, it needs to just have very, you know, how much do you bring home every month, and I don't know.
So Henry, when you send me the name of the contact, I'm gonna ask them to sit down. We'll try to break this into 2 or 3 different tools.
Yeah.
Sounds like a debt calculator. It sounds like a discretionary income calculator.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know what else we got in there that we.
I just hope Robbie's still there.
Well, if not, I'll find somebody. That's all right.
All right, let me send you his contact info.
We need to run it through my accessibility checker also, because we need to make sure that people who have visibility issues can use their readers, their screen readers, to detect all of the fields and all of the language within the form. Right. So as soon as you give me a whatever you want me to check, just let me know. At this point, I'm taking direction. I can't create anything. So just let me know what you want me to run through for accessibility and literacy, and I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, if I can make a comment along those lines too. I found some of the colors and the contrast difficult on my eyes, but I tend to have problems with that. So just something to think about.
Yeah, we've got to get to a simple web interface. We got to get to a visual basic kind of thing.
I thought your paragraph at the top needs maybe to be tweaked but I thought it was good. I think people don't understand what taxes are used for or why they have to pay them. There's a lot of magical thinking when people want to call the police or have their roads paved or something. They don't really think about how that gets financed. And so I thought your introductory paragraph was kind of a useful civics of taxation.
I have a technical point on the tool. The state aid calculation for the bond is not actually 50% because some of the PAYGO money comes out of that.
That's true.
So you need a little bit better calculation. I worked out to it's in the mid 40s. Yeah. So it's not that big of a deal, but it's not exactly 50.
Yeah, the way we've calculated it is in the mid 40s.
That's the way I calculated it when I took the PAYGO money out of, because I guess on a night the total application is going to be like 92, I think, with the CIP and the PAYGO added in.
No, the CIP isn't bonded. The CIP.
No, I know, but it's applied for reimbursement.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So
you're gonna apply for 92 million to be reimbursed at 50%, and then the PAYGO is going to come out of that. So the remaining reimbursement on the bond is going to be less than 50%.
that's a correct mechanics and maybe a correct statement of where we will be when we get through this. But the application as it exists right now is an 85 minus 7, an 85 minus 6 actually.
Right. That's how you got the 78.
You're going to 78, right?
But so what's not being put in for reimbursement? The CIP or?
CIP can't be put, well, it's put in for reimbursement, but it's not put in as bond debt because it's not bond debt. It's operational, annual operational budget.
Yeah. Okay. Something to think about. I mean, it's not going to make that big of a difference. It'll change the numbers a little tiny bit.
Yeah, I'll look at it. Right.
Okay, Rob?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, moving on to item E, the elephant in the barn. This is the COVID-19 related data needs. And I say that because I don't know if anybody watched the governor's press conference today. Pretty interesting.
So I will start this conversation with just one report back, and that is we went back and we looked at our police data to see if we saw any change in domestic violences, domestic calls, suicides, drunken disorderly behaviors, sort of the negative social behaviors that we thought might be tied to isolation and being sort of holed up in the house and that kind of thing. There's no discernible difference between our data this year and our data for the last 3. We have not seen increases, which is really surprising to us. The police looked at it and said, we would have guessed otherwise based on being here and handling the calls, but the reports are not there.
Yeah. How about
fascinating to us. We
how
don't
about DUI charges?
No, we're just not seeing the difference in data.
That's different. Wow.
Our data look like they did last year and the year before and the year before that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does it? Seems really surprising.
Yeah, we don't know why. I've asked the chief to go back and really think about and talk to his folks and find out what's going on here because it doesn't make sense to us.
It may be that some of these things are happening, but that's not being caught in police contact. So the police contacts may not be the best metric for some of these questions that we have. And, it just, if someone's suicidal, if more people are suicidal, unless they die by suicide, and suicide death is extremely rare, you're not going to catch that on any kind of police report.
Yeah, they go to the
hospital. It's just not going to happen. So, but it could be that people are more suicidal, but the police aren't going to know that either. I mean, you have to ask the people who are experiencing that. So I'm not actually terribly surprised.
Wow.
Just another piece to consider though is, with the stimulus supports that have been out there for people, it may be that people are actually, the isolation can be real, but the supports may be better than what they typically are, which maybe has given people more comfort and more capability to just exist.
Yeah.
It was actually one of the explanations that one of the captains suggested was people actually were doing better because they had more money. So, and we were
fixing up, I'll talk about my own life. I've been fixing up my house, and I mean, I've actually been busy with work too. I've been kind of fortunate that way. But I've been putting in, time into my house, and a lot of people are doing that. Everybody knows that in the reports. And so there is some good energy out there. So, it could just be that the data is what it is. And
right. They also have just been collecting at the wrong time because we started COVID problems mid-March, and by late April, we were into the summer. And summer in a beach community is always pretty good. So we may just not have caught it yet. We may just not be seeing it.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
There's one question I want to propose to the committee. Especially Lauren, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. Will we be able to find out what percentage of our population here in South Kingstown has been inoculated against COVID-19 once we get into the program first quarter of next year? Lauren, can you hear me?
I don't, yeah, I mean, I don't know much about this at all, but I think, I mean, there might be a way to get those data from the Department of Health somehow. I mean, obviously we can't get people's identifiable data, but they can de-identify the data, and there's a large enough population of people that it wouldn't, you know, I think it'd be.
Yeah, because if you look at the Crush COVID app, there's data out there about the town, how many people are hospitalized and so on and so on and so on. There's nothing that's personally identifiable. Everything that's out there is just raw numbers.
Aggregate. Yeah. I mean, you could definitely get de-identified data. I suspect, I mean, I don't know how the state is going to collect those data. It would be nice if they do. They could probably track distribution of the vaccine doses to different clinics in different parts of the state, but I don't know.
Distribution and administration by.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but
I one-to-one distribution and administration and report back.
Right.
So the COVID vaccine will go to the clinic. The clinic will administer it. The clinic will report back to the Department of Health on a weekly basis, similar to the flu now. Right. It's reported back. This is how many flu vaccines were distributed. This is how many flu vaccines were administered to South Kingstown population, to out-of-state population, to out-of-region population. And it would be by single numbers, obviously de-identified, but it'll be immunization to geography, and it'll also be distributed by age groups, and it'll be distributed by gender.
Beautiful.
And we'll be able to pull data in relationship to outbreaks and whether or not, you know, where that 5% that's not covered, there'll be excellent data from the Department of Health.
Jocelyn, I have a question. So will they be able, because my understanding is they'll track the administration, but for example, my primary care doctor is in East Greenwich. So would I be in the South Kingstown bin because my residents?
He will report the immunization being administered in East Greenwich to a South Kingstown resident.
Got it. Okay, great.
So that's how I report it. So our students is where I get hit. So it's to a student from New Jersey currently residing in Wakefield, Rhode Island, who received an immunization in Wakefield, Rhode Island, who comes back 3 weeks later and has a fever of 104 and tests COVID positive. That's the data that goes, de-identified data like that. And then it'll be lot numbers, it'll be expiration dates, it'll be manufacturers. It's so specific and actually trackable by about 20 years since lot numbers were created and expiration dates were created.
Yeah, so
everything highly regulated.
Hopefully at the end of the first quarter, we'll be able to develop a level of comfort around here, you know, because going into the summer.
I don't think we're going to have a level of comfort till next fall. That's what I'm in. Not any of us. I mean, all of us are last on the list for vaccination. So, you know, it'll be frontline workers, it'll be nursing homes, it'll be daycare centers, daycare workers, educators, and then the general population. I mean, I might move to a little more ahead in the line just because of what I do for a living, but I don't know that.
Jocelyn, do you know, so I'm thinking of like, for example, the Pfizer vaccine is, you have to have the 2 doses. Would we be able to get the data for that to know who got the first but not the second, or who got both?
So that's going to be a fascinating thing, because where does that tread on someone's civil rights? So the Pfizer vaccine does, and I would rather this not be repeated, it does have that can't be unanticipated being administered at that temperature. There's cavitation because of frostbite. So the question is, will people come back for the second vaccine? So, you know, the first vaccine is probably not going to confer any level of immunity that's effective. So yes, tracked, no, you can't make them come back. You know?
Right, but it'd be curious to see, like, yeah, how many people come back and how many don't, and you know, are people getting the first dose and not coming back for the second?
Yeah.
That would be
Moderna is the holdout. I think a lot of, including me, a lot of people are waiting for Moderna's to get widely distributed because it's refrigerated temperature. Pfizer's got a great product and they came out of the gate quick, but there are incidences now of severe cavitation at the administration site because of frostbite. Which how would you not think that?
Yeah.
You know, you know, and I guess it's painful as get out. So for the kids, it's a non-starter for children.
I heard that it's stored at -70 Fahrenheit. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the other problem is, you know, any moment of instability on transport and potentially undetected instability on transport could render the whole batch unstable. So there's a lot there.
-70 Fahrenheit? I thought it was -70 Celsius.
It's minus craziness. I don't know what the actual number is, but it's enough to cause cavitation at the administration site, which is enough for me to go, I'll wait.
Yeah.
-70 Celsius, I think.
Yeah, I think it is.
Cold.
Yeah, and it's going to be travel with dry ice packages, apparently. Travel in a box that's sealed and wrapped with dry ice, but
I think AstraZeneca and Moderna are quite rapid. They're ready to just. So I don't think Pfizer is going to be out there too long before they get overtaken. So I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just in my wheel.
It's good information, because I was going to ask you, Jocelyn, what's that going to feel like at 70 below zero? It's going into your arm, you know?
Not good.
Yeah. Okay. So can we move on, folks? Next, it says other items of interest. Do we have any other items of interest to bring to the table?
I have just one thing to report, and that is follow up on your conversation, which I did not participate in, but your conversation with Carol Baker and Mike Souza. I just want to let you know that you guys have been responsible for producing the first sort of data product out of the committee. This is 5 years of traffic accident data. It is a draft. It is not, it's not perfect yet. This represents just over 5,700 accidents over a 5-year period. The red dots are 4,800 data points that we're pretty confident in because the lat long were appropriately recorded by the officer who investigated the accident. This blue dot down here represents 900 accidents that, for some reason, all of the officers who reported those accidents decided this was the right lat long. So we've got to clean those data up. We literally have to go in and look at the street addresses and intersections at which those accidents occurred and fix those data. But it's a really, really important map. The town is constantly wrestling with where to make infrastructure, traffic safety improvements. Having this map, once we clean it up and once we can bring the details, this represents a whole host of different data. We can describe the type of accident: car on car, car on bicycle, car on pedestrian, car on fixed object. We can talk about the cost of each accident that's represented here. We can talk about whether there were injuries, and they can all be pulled as separate layers. So this is a really, really neat advance. And your conversation with Mike and Carol produced this, so thank you.
Beautiful. Beautiful thing. Any other items of interest, please?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Jason.
Okay, good, because I'm in the car waiting for my daughter. So I asked for the new McKibben enrollment report or demographic report that came with the facility study a couple days ago to be brought up, just because I felt like it was one of those things where in the past, and we can decide to not touch this with a 10-foot pole, but in the past it was something that's created a lot of controversy in the community as far as trusting the process, considering that McKibben is, was brought in by RGB, given what we know has happened in the past week with David DeQuattro. I think there's probably going to be a lot of people in the community who don't trust this data because of the source. And I thought it might be something for this committee to look at and be able to say, this is not a rigged game type of thing.
So did the report get out to the committee? I had asked Colleen to send it out. Did the members of this committee get
Yes.
that?
It was, yeah.
Yes.
So I've looked at so McKibben's now done 4 updates of an original study in 2017, and then 3 updates, 1 in 2019 and 2 in 2020. And the one that caused the most heartburn was the one in 2019, which is out of character with the other 3 and out of character with the 4 NESDEC reports that have come out in the same time frame. Otherwise, this current release is pretty much in line with what he did in April and what he did in 2017. Rob, you'll remember we had a Skype with McKibben at a building committee meeting, and some of his assumptions back in 2019 were questionable. It looks like he's made changes because his prediction in 2019 was that we were going to go up to 2,900 students by 2028, I think, and now he's predicting 2,400. So, which is pretty close to what he was predicting in 2017. So, I mean, I'm confident looking at this report that it's above the line, above board. But I thought it might be something that a committee like ours, which has a variety of people on it, could have some sway with the community to say that this isn't, David DeQuattro putting his finger on the scale. Any thoughts?
Well, I would suggest the following, at least from my perspective. I think it's always helpful. I mean, back to the discussion about the tax calculator, I think it's always helpful when we can describe things in ways that folks are going to digest easily. Yep. And I do think that the McKibben study and the discussion around the aspects of the school have been very difficult for most people to really grok, understand, and feel comfortable with. There's been a lot of talk about what this represents even. I mean, this is not a solid prediction. This is the one number that he's pointing to, the 2,400 here, the NESDEC numbers, which are slightly lower, are not their predictions. I mean, they're forecasts, they're ranges actually of possible outcomes. And I do think that there's something to be gained in the discussions that are going to be had over the course of the next 6 months in this community from having someone describe what this represents in a useful way. And if there's a statement that could be produced by this committee, it would be helpful.
So one of the things I found very interesting is from that Skype is back in 2019 is that he made, the reason that his production changed is he made a material change in what he thought the migration rate into SK is, which is something that is more interesting than just a school prediction. He was making a statement about how our town is changing. It turned out that no one on the building committee really believed what he was saying, and he's since changed his mind. But that's what interested me more so than the school was he had made a prediction that that he had seen something in real estate data that led led him to believe that things had materially changed as to what type of people were moving in, how old their children were, types of things like that, which is something that.
Right.
I think to your point, Rob, I agree. I think these need to be contextualized for the community so that people don't understand that this isn't like someone can predict the future and give you an exact number of what our student population is going to be. And the thing that I struggle with these projections in general is that they're going to be more useful for larger communities. We have we have a relatively small population, and even though we have a large landmass, we have a big town, but not a lot of people. And so the variability and the usefulness of these projections is not as strong. And they're also very sensitive to external forces. And a great example of that is a pandemic that nobody could have predicted, that could change a number of factors that go into these projections. And we're still in the middle of this, and we're going to be in this pandemic for a while still before things kind of stabilize. And there's going to be consequences. And so it's really hard to know exactly. I mean, it could be, you know, people are stuck in their homes. Maybe the birth rate's going to go up because babies are being made, and we don't know. I mean, anecdotally, I've heard that the people delivering babies are very busy right now. So it's really hard to know. I think in terms of our project and all the various data points and all the various considerations that go into the facilities plan, I think sometimes these demographic projections have received too much weight relative to a number of other factors that need to be considered. And I think that's something, you know, in terms of what the strengths of the data, we have to include projections. It's required by RIDE. We need to think about that. But at the end of the day, I don't know how useful these really are. I think we have to have other factors that guide the decisions about the facilities plan. And I think communicating that to the public is important.
I'd just like to add one additional comment to that from just my work experience, which is that the distortions in demographic predictions are augmented and they have much less powerful explanatory factors when you're talking about small population scales. And so the accuracy is really going to be like almost anything. You're going to have a better result with large sample sizes, but it's particularly distorted in terms of demographic projections for the type of scale we're talking about. And so I would really also caution adherence or commitment to a particular number as truth. I mean, these are existing condition projections that are also malleable and influenced by policy interventions, and intentionally so, right? And so in addition to these kind of exogenous or unexpected factors. So I would caution that as
but there is a
Jason, you've got.
There's a strong long-term trend in place. And 7 of the 8 predictions that have come out.
And I think we can just we don't need to discount it because of, a small sample size at this point.
Right, but it does still beg the question, how much, you can trust a trend and not necessarily trust a particular number. And we are really at a point where the discussion is very much about the number. We expect that in 5 years, we're going to be at 2,400, and in 10 years, we're going to be at 1,900. Those are very, very specific numbers. In 10 years, you want to talk about possibility of change in what's driving those numbers over 10 years. I mean, that's why RIDE's not even using them. It'd be nice to be able to rely on 10-year data if you could trust them. 20-year asset, it'd be really, predictions 10 years out are just crazy. So, we don't, and we're stuck with the 5-year number as a matter of regulation. Is not necessarily the thing to fixate on. It's not necessarily the most important analytical tool we have. It's an important tool. It's not something we completely dismiss. The trends are important. The downward trend is very important. We know that we're losing student population. We know roughly the rate we're going to lose it at. And that does imply a number, but the number is just implied. It's not a certainty, and it could certainly change. I do think that it would be helpful to have a way to explain to the certainty, because I think that so we were having a discussion. I'm going to come at it from a different perspective. There was these postcards that were mailed out to everybody in South Kingstown about this project. They sent out 13,000 postcards, and a lot of effort was made to avoid calling this a survey, because it's not. We have seen 200 responses. I don't know if it's 200 respondents or 200 responses from one guy sitting on the edge of his bed in an apartment in New Jersey. I don't know, what this represents. We're going to get useful data. We are getting questions and comments. There's qualitative data that's coming from this instrument that is useful. And I was trying to explain to folks why we could use this for the questions and comments, but we can't use it for the yes and no answers. We can't represent half of the survey respondents or half of the questionnaire respondents said they liked the project. It's an absolutely misleading thing for us to say. The same is true whenever you're using a statistic, because you lose the detail of the whole set of answers. When you boil it down to one number, which is what we're doing on the demographics, you lose the possible range. You lose all of the discussion around what might happen that would be better and what might happen that could be worse. I'd love to be able to get folks to not fixate on that aggregate number, on that assumed truth, because it's just not.
I'd like to say something on that almost exact point. You're right that the trends are more important to see in this. Some of this, in particular, these demographics are driving some major decisions that the town has to make, whether it's school district or town council or RIDE or whoever. And when we use a tool like this McKibben thing, the biggest concern I have is in his narrative, he talks about plus or minus 2% over the life of the accuracy over the life of his forecast. And then he gives us a forecast 2 years later with a 10% differential in a year that's only 2 or 3 years out. So he has error even in his own, and he's missed numbers significantly. So if I agree with you, we can't use these absolute numbers, but the reality of it is they have influenced the decisions on where additions are going to need to be, what's going to be built, what needs to be built, what needs to be open, what needs to be closed. And we have something demonstrably different than what the committed accuracy was. I understand why it's not accurate. Everything that everybody here can understand and agree with. But that is part of the challenge here, is that we've got, just as an example, this 2017 version that he did for the 2022 year predicted, I think 27, I don't remember which, 2,917 students. And right now for next year, he's predicting 2,662. That's a nearly 10% difference in just 3 years. Now, COVID, that could be related, whatever. It's almost useless, though, to say you're buying something that is, you're being sold something that's supposed to be within 2% 10 years out, and it's not even within 2% 1 year out.
I think that's the point, is that these projections are extremely unstable. And so that's why we're getting these strange differentials from these different reports. And it really just drives home the point that we can't.
I think we can have more reliability.
Yeah, I think it's just demography as a field when you're working in the kind of community we live in is not going to be as reliable as if you're projecting something for Providence or Boston or something of that nature. So we just have to accept that's the limitation of demographic projections for our community. But at the same time, I agree, we can't just throw it away. So I think, one thing I think is the message should be to the community, we're making the best decisions we can with the numbers we have, because that's all we have to work from. But we have to recognize that these numbers are not, written in the stars and absolutely the absolute truth of our future. But, if we're talking about right now we're saying, given the, this projection, this square footage, this school needs some kind of expansion or whatever, that's the best decision we can make. You can only make a decision with the data you have. So, it's a tough spot to be in, but I think it brings home the point that there's other considerations and other factors in the decision making. And it's not just about the number of kids and the number of square feet, and that's the decision. It's about what does the space need to be? How is the space used? How is the space being flexed between different things? Are you using it for just classroom teaching? Are you using it for other things? There's so many other considerations that have to do, and I've heard this come up at the building committee many times around what's the educational goal, what's the educational vision and function of a space. It's not just about X number of kids and X amount of space. So, I mean, those are the things that we need. I think we could do a better job at emphasizing and getting away from sort of this exact number that really is unstable and not that reliable.
I agree. Yeah, I think the problem with even the characterization of it, because it's always going to be that reliable. The next projection could go back to the other structure. It's so sensitive in its variability that we're going to end up with those kinds of wide swings. It's the nature of population dynamics at the scale we're talking about and projections. I just, so I think the question is all of these other really important issues. And then, we can talk about trend lines, but that number is also anchoring whether or not those trend lines are meaningful in what way. And that is part of the problem, is when we start to discuss it that way, we're actually pulling ourselves back into a reliance on that number rather than the larger question. So I would just suggest caution in the description of what these reports mean, because certainly they're challenging, even for us to find we all agree that it's highly variable. What that means, there seems to be a little bit of disagreement about. And most of us have a lot of training in this, which means that folks who are looking at it thinking that number is real, right? It's going to create a lot of concerns and problems. We all know that number is not real. So
Kristen, I want to ask you, because this is your field really, and this is your field.
No, I'm not a demographer, but I do work that includes political demography.
But my point is, you're into policy making and what the public does with data and information. And part of the problem here is that you've got people who see a number and they say that makes my case. That proves it. See that number? I had an expert say I'm right because that number proves it. So the problem isn't just that people misunderstand, it's that people want to create misunderstanding because it makes their case.
I don't even think it's intentional. I think it's simpler. I mean, it's very clear even from looking at people's reaction to polling, right? That we do not understand what a margin of error is very well. It's a familiarity with probability in some ways, what predictions and the nature of assumptions driving outcomes, measurement error, I mean, we all know that the assumptions are fundamentally going to structure the result, right, in this kind of model. And so, you know, I just think there's a real lack of familiarity with any of that, because people think that those numbers are comparable to things like positive COVID tests. And we know that there's errors in that too, right? But I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure that there's a nuanced understanding of uncertainty and probability.
These look like future counts, and they're not. They're not counts. But here's a question about this, though. Again, I think that our problem is we've got to figure out how to use this number in a community discussion, a community debate, a community decision-making process, so that we don't completely discount it, because it shouldn't be completely discounted. It has some value, some weight that we should acknowledge and use. But at the same time, we don't want it to become the center of decision-making. And really, the data were collected. The data were not collected, I'm sorry, the data were produced. The projection was produced in order to achieve a regulatory purpose. Let's admit it. McKibben was hired to make sure that we could get the project that was described to him approved by a state regulatory agency. That's the context within which he was asked to do his work. I'm not disparaging or casting dispersions at all, but that was the context within which he was asked to work. Like a real estate appraiser who's told, I'm trying to sell this property for X, please appraise it. He had a context within which he was working. That cannot be ignored by us. We shouldn't ignore that. It's an important fact. He produced a number. He produced a range of numbers. He produced a possible future, description of a possible future. That's useful, but it's not useful in the same way that the real estate appraisal is useful. Well, yes, it is. And maybe that's the only way it's useful. It gets us through the transaction that he was told we're trying to get through. That's its use. That's its purpose. It doesn't help us understand whether we're building a school that is too big, not very much. It doesn't help us understand whether we're building a school that's too small, or whether we're building a school with the wrong characteristics. The answer to all of those questions has to come from somewhere else. And we don't have a somewhere else to draw from. That's a tough.
But I think, I mean, that to your point, Rob, I think, yeah, we don't have somewhere else to draw from because we are not fortune tellers. We can't predict the future. But at the same time, that's, again, just to maybe belabor the point I'm making, is that we draw from other places to make decisions about what needs to go into this plan. You know, those become questions about, like, what are the community needs? How does this enhance our infrastructure? How is the space going to be used for the students and also for non-students when it's the weekends? And, you know, all of these other questions, those are important factors that go into the plan. It's not just simply about the number of students and the amount of square footage.
Maybe it becomes more important to have an answer to the question, what if it is too big? Or what if it is too small? What are you going to do if it's too big? What are you going to do if it's too small? We haven't even thought about those questions.
Yeah. Those are big ones.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the raw number is not critical. It's the trend.
Jason, you're muted.
Jason, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah, so I don't think it's the number, and I think that's definitely something that needs to be communicated. But I think an analysis of the trend, which is solid, and all of the variability is going in one direction. Every single prediction of the past 12 years has been downgraded every year. It's not going up, it's not going down, it's going down. And so I think that should be part of the discussion, that very likely the predictions that we're seeing now are overestimates with very high certainty.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can discount, and say there's uncertainty. Yes, there's uncertainty, but the history is that it's all going in the same direction.
Yep.
That trend of overstating future estimates goes back even to a forecast that someone showed me in 1995, which was part of the original Broad Rock decision making.
Yeah, and supporting that is the fact that the demographic data from NESDEC shows all of the states, all of the communities for that matter in the region, almost all of them, going in the same direction. And some of them more dramatically, a lot more dramatically than ours. So, yeah.
So I think that you mentioned about the what if something is too small, what if something's too big? I think the intention or the actual interest that's driving this is a heightened fear of going too small. And that creates, I think, this is just theory, but an error on top of an error on top of an error, which then makes you ultimately always have something too big.
Right.
That's what I think we have enough of these forecasts and projections to actually see that in practice. And we have a building that for 20 years people have said was a mistake for us to do because of the pressure put on the whole town. And that's all. I think we're probably beating this thing to death. But if we as a committee are going to make a statement about it, I think those are parts of the statement that have to become relevant.
It's approaching 9 o'clock, and I've always agreed to get you out of here at 9 o'clock. So I want to go to item 6, the next meeting date. And the thing is, the next meeting date, the 4th Thursday in December is Christmas Eve. So, excuse me. So, do we want to meet on the 19th, which is the week before?
Not like we're not going to be celebrating with anybody anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 17th, the week before.
I'm Jewish, so I'm not celebrating ever.
The 17th
So
is the Thursday
the
before.
would be the 17th.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 17th is the Thursday before.
Yeah.
You like that, Jocelyn?
It's the week of finals and dissertation. So it's going to be a really tough week for me, but I'll drag myself here. I'll get here, but that's going to be a hard week. That's always a hard week.
Kristen, is it a hard week for you?
I am. My last class is on the 14th, so we have a Tuesday on a Monday that week. Creative scheduling.
Right.
So I'm available. I mean, I can make it work.
Okay. Anybody else have a problem with it?
I am 50-50, probably leaning towards unable to be there, but I can't make it on Christmas Eve either. So I don't know if I could reschedule, but I don't think, I'm just telling you ahead of time I may not be at that.
It's the second to last night of Hanukkah, so maybe I'll eat some matzo ball soup or something.
Okay.
I can spin a dreidel for you.
I'll eat my potato latkes and light my candles for everybody.
Okay, folks. So we're going to do it the week before the 17th of December, and we'll put that into the agenda. And what I would ask is that if any of you have any ideas for agenda items, to please get them to me, and I'll make sure Rob has them so that Colleen can put them into the agenda for the next meeting.
You can cut.
Can we
out.
try to get the
What are you saying, Rob?
email out to committees maybe soon so that we could line up a few?
Yes.
Because I'm guessing that other folks also have the constraints on schedules that we do.
I will check. I don't know
Surrounding
if it has
December.
been. It'll go out this week if it'll go out within the next 5 business days if it hasn't gone yet.
Okay.
And And I'm just uncomfortable with the fact that we had that long discussion about the McKibben thing and didn't come to any decision. I think we should say we're not going to consider this any further, or say we're going to do something else. It just feels like
It can be tabled for further discussion at the next meeting if you'd like.
Yes. Because there was a lot in there that's just gonna sink in a little bit.
okay, that's all right.
Okay. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
Sure. I'll move to adjourn.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Everybody, please have a safe Thanksgiving with your family or your immediate family, actually. So we'll see what happens. Thank you very much.
Be well.
Oh,
Everyone.